Okay.
Turn this down here.
Ready?
Yes.
I'm Maria Bledsoe, and we are at the Historic Eureka Inn, which is both the business where I work and my home. I'm not the owner, though. I am the innkeeper. I've been here for 2 years now as the innkeeper, although I've worked on and off for the inn for the past 9 years. I grew up in this area. I was born in Charleston, South Carolina, and grew up in Johnson City till 4th grade, the 70s. And then we moved to Jonesborough. And I've been back and forth. I was in the military. I left for different jobs, but Jonesborough has always been my home. So I remember as a teenager, I would walk by the Eureka. And then it was a private residence, and it was in horrible, horrible condition. And I used to kind of fantasize about someone with a lot of money purchasing it and bringing it back to its days of glory, because I was growing up in a house that was built in 1840, and my father was doing the complete restoration process on his own, of course with the help of us kids. And so that whole preservation, restoration mentality got ingrained in us pretty early. So every time I saw a house in Jonesborough that was in poor shape, you know, I would always see the potential. And so it's kind of interesting that I've come full circle and that someone with the money was able to restore this amazing, amazing place. And now I get to run it. My father what happened was my parents ran Jonesborough Bed and Breakfast for 25 years, and I would help them on and off while I was going to school. If they had to leave, I would take care of the guests, and that's usually, or they just needed help. So when the restoration started on the inn, they decided, because they own a small percentage of the inn, that they would retire from the B&B business and channel their energies into the inn. So my father especially, he was the nighttime manager, and when the inn first opened, we had a full staff. We had 5, 6, sometimes 7 people doing now what 2 and 3 do, sometimes 1. So he would spend the night, and then he would set out breakfast in the morning, and then that was pretty much his shift. And then they would have not a hostess, but a reservation person come in, and then they would run the show till 3 or 4, and then they would be relieved and then someone would work till 11, and then my father would come down. So he needed a break every now and then, so I would do the nighttime manager. And then, of course, there's never really one job down here at the inn. You may be working the desk, but you're also cleaning rooms, putting away dishes, sweeping. You might be working out in the garden. So it's definitely task oriented. And then I left for a few years, and during that time, the whole time the inn was operating in the red, and the owners knew that that the inn was not going to make them rich or really even make them any money. They were doing it to save the building. And basically, as Bill said, to put his money where his mouth is, because he's the chairman, Bill Kennedy, the main owner, he's the chairman of historic zoning, and so his whole life, and not his whole life, but so much of his life is preservation and restoration, and he knew that this was just an opportunity he couldn't let slide. So, and that worked out for both the building and him. But and the thing I love about the Eureka is that it captures the whole story of Jonesborough. In the 60s, Jonesborough was basically a dying town. There was tourism was not big by any means. You know, Johnson City had the jobs, and as well as Kingsport with Eastman. And Jonesborough was just this quiet little sleepy place with a bunch of old buildings that were falling into bad repair. And part of the problem is, you know, you have people who inherited these buildings and they didn't know anything about restoration or preservation. And so when the historic zoning started, that's when this revitalization happened in Jonesborough, and people who really cared about old buildings were purchasing the properties, and the restoration process started, and then, you know, had to be approved so that people weren't doing crazy things like pressure washing a building and destroying the wood on it and using the right kind of paint. So, and that's the story of the Eureka. When the new owners came in 1997, this place was a barn. It was horrible. I mean, the back porch was on cinder blocks, rotten wood everywhere, chain link fence around the back, wildcats, dogs, broken windows. It was really, you know, if it'd been me, I would have sat in a corner and cried. And they were using the rooms as storage for auto parts, and just really, really bad. So, and that's what kind of what Jonesborough was back in the 60s and early 70s. And then they started. It took 3 years and almost $3 million. And the detail, it was just amazing. But with Bill in charge, it's understandable. So anyway, and that's what I love about the Eureka, is that it epitomizes the charm and beauty of Jonesborough. And it also is so unique in that it has all the feel of a private residence. Every room is different. Every room was thoughtfully decorated, from the furniture to the color of the paint. And but then you have all the amenities of a hotel. You do have your own bathroom. Our motto is history, charm, romance, and your own bathroom. So anyway, so you have all the amenities of a hotel. You have this beautiful place that's decorated in 19th century style, but we have Wi-Fi. And we have cable television, and all the TVs are hidden in the armoire, so you don't even have to look at it if you don't want to. And then, of course, the private bath. And the thing I love about being in the Innkeeper is that I get to do the things I really care about and make it part of the inn. And I believe in the green movement. And we use all natural cleaners in the rooms, in our laundry. We do all of our own laundry. We hand iron every sheet and pillowcase, and everything in the garden is organic. We make our own soil. We make our own compost. We recycle everything that we can, as well as compost everything that we can. And I think it shows when you walk into a room, when you walk into the building. It is well loved. So, what else? The inn itself is unique, in that what it has to offer and the way it was restored and set up. But my goal is in the garden. I think the garden is one of the things that is going to help us really push forward. As far as the immediate garden and courtyard, it's becoming a very popular venue for weddings and receptions, and there are certain times of the year where it is the ideal place to have a wedding. But what I'm working on is our edible garden, and that is an organic garden where we have raised beds. And this fall I'll be planting cherry trees and a pomegranate tree. We've already got blueberry bushes, blackberry bushes, raspberry bushes. And the goal is that when our guests tour the garden, if they want to go over to the edible garden and pick fresh blueberries for lunch or fresh fruit, that they have that option. Of course, it's for me too to be able to have fresh fruit on the breakfast bar. And as far as the edible garden goes, eventually we'll have 6 raised beds. We have 4 now. And part of the edible garden will be a monarch butterfly way station. So I have probably about 1/3 of my plants that'll be going in shortly. I'm clearing some grassy area for them. And what's great about the monarch butterfly way stations is you can get them certified. And I think that will be great for the inn to attract people who are, into kind of the ecotourism, as well as just love nature and know that we're doing something unique. I've never stayed at any place or met any other innkeepers who are as diligent and motivated in this area as I am. and that's neither good nor bad. It's just different, and different is good, certainly. So I'm really excited about the butterfly way station, and I love butterflies. It's hard to take life. It's hard to take yourself too seriously when you're creating a haven for butterflies, and that's good when this is my life 24/7. Even when I'm not at the inn, even if I close for a few days and go away, it's still, my responsibility. And when you have a place that dictates pretty much every moment of your life, you do have to have factors in your life that are inspirational. Anyway, so this year, basically last year and this year, I've been working with the help of Bill, of course, and our contractors. We're trying to get to this kind of jumpstart level. We had to have the entire outside of the inn painted. The inside was painted. The repairs, now we're just finishing up some. We've put in an extra water line for the garden hose in the garden, so I don't have to drag around 500 feet of hose. That was fun. So, and just trying to make things where we're working hard. We're still working hard, but we're working smarter, and it's not as labor intensive. So we can get to this point where we have the storage that we need, the repairs, or the major repairs are done, and so we can kind of maintain, and then from there, really work on driving accommodations.
All right, anytime.
Robert Mitchell bought this lot on which the Eureka now stands when it was approximately an acre from the commissioners of the town of Jonesborough in 1797 for less than $90. He then built this part of the building, which is still on the corner, in about 1797, between 1797 and 1799. And we still have, particularly on the interior, the style of his original home. Then through the 19th century, as the home changed hands a few times, a large room was added to the east, and what is now the reception area of the inn was added in about 1854. Then in 1900, Peter and Angeline Miller, his wife, bought that home and expanded it and opened it as the Eureka Hotel. When they expanded it, they added a wing all the way to the corner of the building on the east end and part of the back of the building on the west side toward the south, and opened it as a hotel. Then the Russells bought it in 1910 from Peter Miller and his wife, and they added a wing onto the back, which I'll show you in a few minutes, and also connected parts of the hotel that were not previously connected on the interior when Peter Miller had it as the Eureka Hotel. The Russells named it the Russell Hotel. Then in 1922, the Greshams bought it. Squire Gresham was a judge, was a justice of the peace, and he ran the hotel for a number of years and then passed it on to his son, Buddy Gresham. Beginning with the Depression and continuing on through World War II and the immediate post-war years, the hotel gradually declined, so that by the early 1990s it really had become a derelict building. And the town, concerned about it, but also concerned to preserve it because it had been designated as historically significant, proceeded to enforce its ordinance against demolition by neglect in the early 1990s. We worked with the owner through a period of about 4 years, from about 1993 until 1997, and finally were able to buy the building from the owner and begin its rehabilitation in 1997. I don't know whether this is going to be interesting or not, but let's go ahead and do it. You can always cut, right?
Yes, digital tape is inexpensive.
Yeah. Why don't we just talk about this right here? This section of the building was added by Peter Miller when he expanded the previous home into the Eureka Hotel. This door was an entrance to what was known as the sample room. Traveling salesmen could rent the room behind this pair of doors and set up exhibits for their wares and also entertain their customers in the room that was known as a sample room. We wanted to keep that entranceway closed because we needed to build hotel rooms behind it, but we wanted to keep it on the exterior so that it would tell the story of the sample room, and so one of the rooms behind it is called the sample room. That, to us, has a lot of historic significance, and to the extent that we can, we have maintained those signs of historical significance in previous uses throughout the inn. Peter Miller's section of the hotel in 1900 stopped at this corner, which meant, as you can see down to my right, the thickness or the depth of this part of the building was not very large. That was room enough only for a set of bedrooms. We got to the bedrooms on the second floor by going out onto the porch at that time. And of course, as I've just mentioned, on the ground floor, that entire space was occupied by the sample room. When the Russells bought the hotel in 1910, they added this wing to the left, which gave room not only for connecting the Peter Miller's section of the east end of the hotel on the interior, but also gave room for another pair of rooms, one on the second floor and the other on the ground floor, on this particular east end of the inn. This is a good view for Peter Miller's addition to the back of the inn. You can see the change in the slope of the siding, and where that change occurred was where Peter Miller added his addition behind when he converted the home into the hotel. His addition was not as strong as the original 1797 to 1799 home. And so, of course, it settled, as we can see, just looking down at the change in the slope of the siding. And then let's go across the street. When Peter Miller opened the Eureka Hotel in 1900, he added the present front porch, but he did not add the dormers. When the Russells bought the building from Peter Miller in 1910, they added the 3 dorms that you see on the front of the building. Peter Miller also added the chimneys that we can see, the 3 chimneys, which we've restored. We were able to restore parts of the porch that were missing by the time we bought the building, based on a picture of the building with Peter Miller standing in front of it that was made apparently shortly after he opened the Eureka Hotel. And we use that in our materials, use it in our brochures today. That was very important for us to accurately restore the columns on the ground floor level beneath the porch and various details of the building itself so that they could be restored to their original style. Here is a door on the west end of the back porch of the inn, which doesn't have any steps to it and doesn't seem to lead anywhere. But it's another example of a part of the inn that we felt tells a story, and we wanted to keep it. This was the entrance for black people during the period of segregation. African Americans could enter the back porch at lunchtime, go through a buffet line, get their lunch, and sit down on the back porch or take their lunch off of the back porch somewhere else and eat it during the period of segregation when they were not allowed to enter into the front door of the Gresham Hotel, as it was called at that time, and eat with white people in the hotel's dining room. And we felt that keeping that door was important to continue to tell the story of the period of segregation in our country. When we bought the building, a remnant of the original back porch was still here, which was in terrible condition, and of course we had to completely rebuild the back porch. So far as we could tell, the inn did not previously have a second floor porch on the back, but we built that, of course, for the use of our guests and in order to give us a fire escape off of the second floor. The back section to my left, closest to the side street, is the part that was added by Peter Miller and later further expanded by the Russells in 1900 and 1922. The Russells added the wing to my right to expand the hotel to the back. When we bought the hotel, there also was a very much weakened and run-down garage that probably, based on its design, had been built in the 1920s to accommodate a Model A, and also had a second story to it that appeared to have been used as a pantry for the kitchen of the hotel. That building had not been well built in the first place and was in very bad condition, and so we demolished it with the permission, of course, of the Historic Zoning Commission, which is the commission that must approve any changes to any of the exteriors of any of the properties here in our historic district. The Historic Zoning Commission was established here in Jonesborough in 1970 when the town of Jonesborough passed its historic zoning ordinance. So what you see of the town of Jonesborough now in the central business district and in the surrounding residential areas is as a result of 40 years of historic preservation on a community basis with the full support and backing of the local municipal government. We found that the town was really dying in the 1960s and early 1970s, and the forefathers of the town, the leaders of the town in the late 1960s and 1970s, integrated historic preservation in an overall plan that was needed to improve infrastructure such as water and sewer and police protection and fire safety. And the town that we have today as a thriving small town, Tennessee's oldest town, is the result of all of that effort combined with the work of many property owners who have joined in the effort and who love this little town. As you can tell, I tell this story very regularly.
Well, you do seem to have it down, and I appreciate that.
Let's go upstairs. It's really easier to see the growth of the building upstairs.
That's where I watch it.
And I guess she's got the rooms open that we can go into, does she?
Yeah.
Let's go on the front porch first. How about that? I love this front porch. It's just high enough off of the street that I can really look up and down Main Street and see what's going on and hear what's going on. It's also close enough to the street that I have that feeling of intimacy with the street while still being somewhat removed from the street. This is one of my favorite spots in Jonesborough because I can see all the way 2 blocks up Main Street to the west, and I can see, particularly in cooler weather when the leaves are off the trees, up to the opposite hill on the east end of Main Street. The rail back in 1900 and earlier was set this low on purpose because this was a sitting porch, and the idea was that you should be able to sit on the porch and enjoy looking over the rail. It's a very different philosophy from our present philosophy of making the rail at least 42 inches high so that people are safer when they're standing and walking. We simply warn our guests that the rail is low, and many of our guests thoroughly enjoy this front porch, as I do when I can sit out here. Back during the time when Peter Miller had this open as his hotel, the Eureka Hotel, a guest had to walk out on this porch in order to enter the bedrooms on the east end of the hotel. There was a room behind this window and a room behind that window, and here where you can see the break in the siding, there was an entrance through which the guests entered a little anteroom and then went into their respective rooms. Their rooms were isolated from the rest of the hotel. There was no inside connection until later when the Russells bought the hotel and expanded it in 1910.
What were the bathing, bathroom facilities?
We're going to talk about that. So we'll get to that next. I think to show this. When we bought the hotel in 1997, we found 2 bathing facilities on the second floor. No, 3. 3 bathing facilities on the second floor and 1 bathing facility on the ground floor. This was one of the bathing facilities on the second floor. Off of the central hall, you could enter through that door, which we've now converted into a closet, and go into a toilet room and lavatory. And you could enter into this door, which now leads into a bedroom, and go into a shower room. The partition inside the shower room and the toilet room only extended to about 7 feet. The ceiling in the room was the existing approximately 9 feet. This meant that there was no sound control. There was open space between the top of the partition of the toilet room and the shower room without any sound control and without any ventilation control right into the bedroom behind these 2 facilities, which was the cook's room. In the area that we have now converted into a bathroom, there was a stair that went down to the kitchen. And so this room that we're in now, behind the shower room and the toilet room that opened into the hall, was the cook's room. She had direct access to the kitchen by this stair that was where this bathroom is now. Can you imagine the crudeness of having guests with no sound control, no ventilation control, using the toilet room and the shower adjacent to the cook's room with only a short partition, not even extending to the ceiling, between the cook's room and those more public facilities? Now you'll need to get this down in this direction. One of the 3 bathing facilities on the second floor of the hotel when we bought it in 1997 was what we have affectionately called the tub room. This was a partition that came out into the hall a few feet and then down the hall in this direction. And in front of this window right here was a toilet room with a lavatory. The partition then went with a door where I'm standing now to give access to the toilet room. And in the longer part of this partitioned off area in what is now the hallway, there was a tub, a clawfoot tub. The partition providing privacy for the clawfoot tub and for the toilet room was this partition right here. We have kept it and simply mounted it on this wall. It only went this high. There was a private entrance into the tub room right about here from the adjacent bedroom. The wall, the door to the adjacent bedroom, which we now call the tub room, was around the corner from us. But again, we had a situation here in which neither the toilet room nor the tub room were really partitioned off from the rest of the hotel from the point of view of sound control or ventilation control. And of course, they didn't have the type of ventilation systems that we have now. But we kept this partition and mounted it on this wall as an ornament purely because it tells the story that I just told you of what we have come to call the tub room. And so this marvelous bedroom behind it, which is now a fully modern, very comfortable bedroom, we simply call the tub room, with its completely modern and beautifully decorated attached private bathroom. This bedroom we call the jury room is the largest room in the inn. We now have it outfitted that it can accommodate 5 people. The reason we call it the jury room is that tradition has it that particularly during the 19-teens and the 1920s, this was where jurymen were sequestered. As many as 12 men may have served on the jury, and of course at that time women did not serve on juries. So if the jury needed to be sequestered, there were available a total of 12 cots in this room, and the bailiff or the deputy sheriff or whoever was keeping guard of the jurymen to make sure they obey all the rules could put a cot just outside the room. And of course the juryman could go down the hall, as anyone who was a guest could, to use the shower room or the toilet room that I mentioned a few minutes ago and showed you. Can you imagine 12 men sleeping in this room, or trying to sleep in this room at one time while being sequestered in jury duty? On the front porch we have 12 chairs, 1 chair as a memorial for each juryman that may have had to spend the night from time to time in this room with 11 other men. This spot on the wall marks the border between Robert Mitchell's original home, which runs from here to the front of the building and on the street side of this central hallway, and the addition to the rear on the west side, southwest side of the inn that was added by Peter Miller. This partition was a single plank partition. That was all the thickness that we found when we bought the building. These planks are tongue and groove planks, and they're beaded with 1 bead on the edge of each board. Nice wide boards that go all the way to the ceiling, that were anchored into the ceiling and also into the floor. But there was no more thickness in the wall than that. And that was a style that was characteristic of partition construction in the late 18th century, 1790s, and in the early part of the 19th century until around probably 1820. By that time, the more typical construction that we're accustomed to now, at least in this part of the country, became a lot more common. This was another example in which we wanted to keep the character of the beaded boards, tongue and groove boards, as a memorial for that style of construction that was here originally in 1800 and continuing on through the entire part of the 19th century and on into the 20th century. We simply removed these boards long enough to build a modern partition behind them to meet modern needs of sound control and safety, fire safety. And then we mounted these boards back on the wall as an ornament and as a memorial. The same is true for the ceiling. We've kept the plank ceilings in the hallway and also in the jury room by simply mounting the boards back onto the modern ceiling after having built the modern ceiling.
So how old are these planks?
Well, the ones that are original, and we did have to replace a few of them, and we did have to reproduce a few of them, but the ones that are original, we believe, go back to about 1800, when Robert Mitchell built this as his home.
And what type of wood is this?
It's poplar. And these wide plank boards are poplar too, most likely, in that we had huge poplar trees at that time and on through most of the 19th century. And most of the interior woodwork was done with poplar. The ceiling boards may be pine, but I really think they most likely are also poplar. One of the processes of the adaptive reuse and the restoration that we did in order to outfit the building for modern use, for lodging, we had to open every cavity of every wall throughout the entire building on at least one side of each wall in order to evaluate the structure and in order to put in the necessary modern wiring and safety features. In this particular wall on the staircase, there was plaster, which is somewhat rough, that we thought probably dated from the Gresham period, probably the middle of the 20th century, that was in good enough condition for us to keep it. But most of the plaster was badly deteriorated because for decades there had been no control of moisture or humidity in the building, and certainly no control of temperature. So we removed the plaster, we removed all of the woodwork. We labeled each piece of woodwork after having done a drawing of the building, of each floor, and labeled each room, giving it a particular number. We labeled each piece of woodwork, including each door, and stored them out in back of the building in a tractor trailer that we rented for about a year and a half. And during the summer of 1998, we set up a system out in the backyard, as it was then, what presently is the garden and patio area, and actually washed all of the woodwork, keeping the labels on them, which we had inscribed the labels on pieces of metal and actually had attached them, fastened them soundly to each piece of woodwork. And then as we reassembled the building during the reconstruction period primarily of 1999, we brought each piece of woodwork back and put it back exactly where we had found it initially, and that way kept the various styles inside the building, so that currently you can go through the building if you're knowledgeable of the styles of around 1800 as opposed to the middle part of the 19th century and as opposed to 1900 and then still later in 1910. You can actually read the building, so to speak, by looking at the style of the woodwork and the style of the construction, and see without my having to tell you which part of the building was built in which period of time. When the Russells bought the building, they apparently covered the entire outside of the building with the present siding. So it's not as clear on the outside of the building as it is on the inside of the building, but again, we wanted to continue to have the building tell its own story by preserving and replacing precisely where each piece of woodwork belonged as we reassembled the building, having taken it apart. In our disassembly part of the building, as we evaluated the construction, the condition of the construction of the building, we then reinforced all of the partitions necessary, and we added a total of 17 additional piers beneath the building in order to shore up the floor system and the walls of the building in reinforcing it to get it ready for modern use and modern occupancy. We also thoroughly insulated all of the walls between each of the bedrooms, and the exterior walls we insulated with foam insulation that we cut pieces of foam to fit into each of the cavities, and then caulked around each piece of foam into the studs of the walls in order to, on the one hand, permit the exterior siding to continue to breathe and have some ventilation, which it needs for preservation of the siding, but in order to control the temperature and to control sound from outside, to make this as quiet an inn as possible. We didn't spare any means or take any shortcuts in trying to make this a thoroughly comfortable inn to meet all of the needs that any modern guest would expect and enjoy. Oh, here's one other point. As we removed the plaster from the walls that we had to remove, we've found many layers of wallpaper in various parts of the building, including wallpaper on the ceilings, which was customary during the 19th century. Because of the moisture conditions in the building and the deterioration of the plaster, we found that the wallpaper was very easy to remove and relatively easy to separate one layer of paper from another. So we collected large samples of each of the papers that we found in the building. We labeled each sample that we kept as to where we had found it, whether it was on a wall or a ceiling, and which room it was in, and even which wall of which room. And we mounted those samples of paper on a total of about 75 shrink boards, acid-free boards wrapped in shrink wrap. And then when we got ready to determine the interior design of the hotel, we spread all those papers out and spent a considerable amount of time in a large conference room going from one paper to the other and identifying the styles of the various papers. We did not go to the expense of actually reproducing any of the papers, but we let those papers tell us the general styles of the 19th century, particularly in the early part of the 20th century, that had been used in decorating and furnishing the hotel when it was in its prime, and when it had been used as a private home. And we used that as the basis upon which to furnish the inn and also choose the window treatments and the wall coverings that we've used in the present inn restoration.
Who did your in this recent renovation? Who's your designer?
Mary Powell, who's one of our partners. For the restoration of the inn, we put together a partnership that included me in doing the preservation part of it, our mayor and her husband, Toby and Baxter Bledsoe. They were the innkeepers, and their daughter is currently the innkeeper, Maria. The town administrator, Bob Browning, was one of our partners. Also, a real estate businessman, Steve Bacon, is one of our partners. And finally, Mary Powell, our interior designer, is one of our partners. So each person in the partnership had a particular role to play for the development of this restored and rehabilitated Historic Eureka Inn.
We rarely charge to use the garden or the inn unless it's, a big wedding or something, because we know it will promote the inn. This year we hosted the first annual Lavender Festival, which was a big hit. And it was held down First Avenue outside, as well as in the courtyard and back behind the inn. And it was basically a festival celebrating all things organic and lavender. And great vendors and great turnout. Of course, we were blessed in that the Food Network was in Jonesborough that weekend, so that helped. And Chef Tyler Florence stayed here, so that was pretty cool. I didn't know who he was, but everybody else did. So there's a lot of traffic through here. But and then I host local crafters. Last November, they all were in different rooms, and then they set up again in June in the garden, and that went over well. My side of it as the innkeeper is, you can't just maintain, an inn if you want it to grow. And the inn was just being maintained. My parents were running it. but they were retired. They were tired and marketing it and having special events and doing all this stuff. They just wanted to be able to make sure the bills got paid. And so when I came in, my goal was, and now my goal is that in 5 years, the inn will be hopefully carrying its own. We're fortunate in that Bill Kennedy is a huge financial support to the inn. Without him, I don't think we'd even be open. But I'd like to eventually remove that burden from him, and get to a point where the inn really is taking care of its own. What does it mean to be an innkeeper in the 21st century? I think, like you see on the internet, that the people who manage to find jobs and be successful at them are the people who've done several things over the years. You have your people who've worked in a bank for 20, 30 years. That's all they've done. And you don't see a lot of flexibility in those people. They may love their jobs, but they come in and they have a set routine, and that's good for them. And I'm not that way, and the inn is not either. I get up in the morning and I may have to do breakfast for 32 people. That's fun. It's like, God, will you quit eating the yogurt so fast before I can refill it, And I mean, it's just huge, And I remember one time, 3 pots of coffee and it wasn't even 8:20. Breakfast starts at 8. We just had people sucking down the coffee, and I'm trying to, it's like, I get up in the morning and I put everything out that I can, and then I've got to go to the grocery store. I have to go to the grocery store every morning that I do breakfast, for at least 6 people or more. Or I may not have breakfast. Maybe I don't have any gas, but I still have a garden to take care of. And even though I have part-time assistants in the garden and in the inn, I'm the hub. And that's what being an innkeeper is that you're involved in everything. You may not be cleaning those rooms, but you better be ready to clean them. Because if somebody doesn't show up or has an emergency or goes on vacation, you're doing it all. One of the things that helped me kind of reach a better level was I read the works of Viktor Frankl, who was a survivor of Auschwitz, and to me the greatest philosopher of the 20th century. And there's 2 things that he said that really helped me during the hard times, is that, stop asking, why am I here, and ask, what is the universe asking of you? What is it that you and you alone can give this world? It may be that you alone can take care of this person, or you alone can do this job. Which is it? And that hit me. It's like, this is it. This is me. This is my job. This is where I need to be, and I can do this, and I can do it well. You can't always do it well. Some days you just suck. And the world sucks too. But 95% of the time, this is exactly where I need to be. And then the other thing that he taught me was, everybody's got a job to do. Stop whining. You chose this. This is, you made this choice. Nobody put a gun to your head. Nobody said that you had to do this. Nobody really even offered me this job. I just offered myself. So with that in mind, do the job. And if you're in a situation where you're not happy, then change it. I know what my weaknesses are. I'm pretty clear on those, and I know what my strengths are. And I think that's one of the greatest accomplishments a person can make, is to recognize both of them, and don't focus on the weaknesses, but find the people who can help you in that area. I tend to get things cluttered around me, as I'm doing whatever. I tend to look around and it's like, oh my gosh, where did all this come from? Well, I just bring my assistant Melissa in. I'm like, help me with this, and it's gone. So I feel very blessed in that my team, my 2 part-time gardeners, Nikki and Tammy, and my innkeeper assistant Melissa, you talk about a core group, hard workers. So I don't think I've worked with better people. So it's, that's a blessing, is to have the right kind of people who you can delegate to and know that there's no micromanaging. So.
Why don't you walk us through your little stations over the course of the morning?
Okay. Back here is where we have breakfast. So usually at night I put all this stuff away, and we have the pastries and the cereals and the fruit here, the yogurts and the drinks here. Of course, we always have that out for the dishes. If you look through the window here, you can see the reservation desk. It's just where the paperwork is done, where I answer the phone. We do online reservations, and I have to check the email periodically to see if any have come through to update the system. When folks come in and they see someone at the reservation desk, that's good because I can let them know that we have rooms open, tell them about the inn, give them a brochure. So that's definitely the hub as far as our guests are concerned. Back here is our coffee and tea station. And I always have a large variety of teas for folks, regular decaf. Over here, this is where I put out all the breads for toast. And there's probably about 35 items on the breakfast bar. So even though we don't have a real kitchen where I can cook, people have lots of good choices. Most of the stuff I put out is organic or natural. Do a lot of kashi and Nature's Path. Oatmeal, cereals, that kind of thing. On the weekend, if we're pretty full, I will do a couple of hot items. Usually a hash brown casserole or a quiche for people, and that's a huge hit. So this is our drink station. We offer all natural beverages to our guests. I did away with all the Coke and Pepsi and all that crap. No high fructose corn syrup here, so these have been a real hit. Bathroom. This is the hub, which I spend a lot of my time. Of course, we do our own laundry and ironing. So we have our 2 commercial washers and dryers. And normally this door is shut, but since I didn't do breakfast, I left it open. And it usually stays pretty cluttered. This is my kitchen. It's about, what, 5 feet, about 5 feet. So, and this is one of the reasons we obviously can't do a hot breakfast, because we just don't have the workspace or the appliances. There's no stove. I have a small convection oven that I use for the hot items, and this is, so it's basically coffee and dishwasher and the sink in here. Hopefully one of our projects in the next year is to turn our ironing room into an efficiency kitchen. Because if I'm going to live here indefinitely and I love to cook, I kind of need a bit more space. And it'll be great for the inn because we do have people who need kitchens sometimes. And laundry is an ongoing process, never ends. So that's pretty much that.
Where's your ironing?
The ironing room is this way.
Oh, you've got your own room.
Yeah. We have a separate room for ironing because we just don't really have the room, and we really don't even have room to fold. What we have to do is use one of the open rooms for folding. And then Melissa's in here ironing. So this is our ironing board, and I ordered a special ironing board for us. It's rectangular so the whole sheet fits. We use a Rowenta hand iron, and we starch all pillowcases and sheets and watch television while we do it. So, it's actually, a lot of people can't believe we hand iron the sheets, but sometimes that's the fun part. You know, you're in there alone, you can pop in your favorite movie or show or watch television and just iron away, you know. So it's like these days are great for it, rainy days.
Is it actually raining? Can you maybe
it had stopped.
Point out your garden at least from the cover?
And we have 3 wonderful porches. This is one where people tend to like to have breakfast. Nikki is one of my part-timers, and we're scrubbing the railings. Some of them have to be repainted. So she's a lifesaver. And then we have our garden, which is, I spend a lot of time out here when I can. The immediate area, you want to walk down?
Sure.
This is where we host weddings with the gazebo. It's a great place for the musicians, or a lot of times the wedding cake. Our goal is to make this garden bloom year-round, with the exception of probably January. But from basically March through October and even really part of February, to have things blooming, so to help promote the garden. Because when we have the bridal fair in February, people come out here to see this as a venue, and it's really, you know, sleeping and kind of dead. But I've got all my plants out right now so they can get a good rain, and we're getting ready to feed them. So we use all organic food on our plants, no chemicals, nothing yucky in the garden, just elbow grease. Across the creek over there is where we're developing the edible garden. You can kind of see one of the raised beds through the tree there, and that whole section there, it's a rectangle, will be nothing but flowers and fruit and walkways eventually. So, but it's a slow process because I'm doing most of it by myself. So.
And what is this?
This is the Jonesborough Repertory Theater. So when there's a play, we keep our gate open so people can use it as a pass-through, and people come out here. This is the one place we allow our guests to smoke, and so when the theater has an intermission, people come out here to have a ciggy. It's a you know, constant it's a constant job out here, as any gardener knows. So, but fortunately I have good health, so it makes a difference. I couldn't do this by myself. There's no way. In many ways, it's you know, it's like any job. You get up, you go to work, you try to be as productive as possible, and then, you know, it all goes crazy sometimes. Some days are great, some days you just want to run away. For me, it's kind of different because I live here. So this is, when it's your home and your business. For anyone who's run a bed and breakfast, or maybe even stayed at a bed and breakfast, they have an idea. It's a constant challenge to not overdo it, so that, you know, you don't want to be stressed out, blah blah blah. I don't, you know, whatever. So nothing new.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.